Welcome to the Pregnantpreneur Project, your quest to the most sacred adventure of your lifetime. Here is your host, Blanca Vergara.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Pregnantpreneur Project. Today we have another outstanding guest. This is Dr. Thomas R. Verny. He's a psychiatrist. He's a writer and academic, presently on the faculty of the Santa Barbara Graduate Institute. He has previously taught at Harvard University, University of Toronto, York University, Toronto, and St. Mary's University, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dr. Verny is one of the world's leading experts on the effects of prenatal and early postnatal environment on personality development. He's also an internationally recognized author who has written 7 books and published 47 scientific papers on topics relating to his field of science. Dr. Verny entered into my life after having a miscarriage and in the time I was bearing my first son, with his book, The Secret Life of the Unborn Child. This book has been published was published first in 1991, and since then has become an international bestseller in 27 countries. This book brought to light the enriching environment that an unborn child first encounters inside the womb and has changed the pregnancy and birth experience for parents all over the world. And that, ladies and gentlemen, includes me. Dr. Verny is a strong advocate of conscious parenting. He believes that parents can help actualize their child's full potential through active prenatal care, communication, and stimulation. He is the founder of the Association for Prenatal and Perinatal Psychology and Health. He currently practices psychiatry in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and you can get to know much more about what he is doing in his website, trvernymd.com. Of course, I am going to be adding this link in the same page where you will find this recording so that you can easily just click there. Dr. Verny, I'm so delighted to have you this time here with us. Thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
Well, Dr. Verny and everybody who's listening, I'm really a book addict. I love reading. I have always loved reading, and I'm just kind of awakening to my intuition. And now, because of the program, I have lots of books on my desk, and somehow complete this array and at the same time complete order. And I was about to clean my desk before calling Dr. Verny, and I saw a book that I love that is called Women Who Run with the Wolves by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. And something in me told me, hey, no, you will need that book. And in the preparation for this interview, I found the videos of Dr. Verny, his YouTube videos online that I totally recommend to you to see. And he has 2 in which he explains what is prenatal and perinatal psychology, but he has a 3rd video where he reads a poem. And this poem is about a story, the story of Baba Yaga. It's a story that is very old, is from Eastern Europe, and of course, not a coincidence. In the book that was on my desk, this story is developed in detail with explanation of what that means for women. And what is very interesting and absolutely not a coincidence is that the title of this chapter is called The Recovery of the Intuition as Initiation. So I thought this was an excellent way of welcoming Dr. Verny because really pregnancy is the recovery of intuition as initiation. The feelings and emotions of women are fundamental in this moment of pregnancy. And Dr. Verny has all the science behind this sentence. Could you please start introducing to us why is so important this fact that the mother is an active participant in the development of a new person?
Sure. Nobody has ever asked me that before, I must tell you. So this is, after all these years, here comes a new question, which I really appreciate. I think that, one of the things that I and my colleagues who have been working with me in this new science of pre- and perinatal psychology have been trying to change is the way society looks at pregnancy. For the longest time, first of all, pregnancy was only something that women were involved with, and the men stayed out of it. And secondly, it was seen as a fairly passive thing, like a woman got pregnant, and 9 months later she delivered the baby, and that's when society started taking an interest in the baby. And, of course, what we have discovered is that that is very far from the truth, because those first 9 months before the baby ever sees the light of day are probably the most important 9 months. I wouldn't say probably. I would say the most important 9 months in the life of any human being. And so, the mother's position really, instead of being just sort of like a passive incubator of the baby, which is the way she was looked upon before, becomes an active participant, as you have just said. So, if I had my way, and since you're working with business people and entrepreneurs, this may be something that they might be interested in. If I had my way, every pregnant woman would wear a T-shirt which says, "Baby under construction." Because this is truly what's happening. Every minute of every day, new nerve cells and new cells in the body are being laid down. And if that woman is stressed, or if she's depressed, or if she's anxious, or if she's on drugs, then those cells will not develop according to the master plan, according to the genes. They will not develop. And so they will become dysfunctional. And we can talk about that a little bit more later. But what is so important is that the pregnancy is like the most important period for the developing baby, but also for the mother, because she also is undergoing huge changes. Instead of being, just a woman who is independent, has no one to look after, so to speak. I mean, she may have to look after her mother or her husband, but in terms of her own flesh and blood, really, there's a huge change when she becomes a mother. And suddenly there's this tiny little being who is totally dependent on her. So she has to develop, you were talking about intuition, she has to develop a whole new way of relating to people, relating to herself, her body image, her self-image, her self-esteem. All these things are changing. So what I'm trying to say, as briefly as I can, is the fact that pregnancy really is a time of tremendous change for the mother, for the baby, of course, and then the mother's family, extended family, and to some extent society.
Wow. I really appreciate how succinct you are putting it, because ladies, in his book he goes in complete detail and he tells you all these papers that he really knows where it's coming from. I found a study, and at this moment I cannot find a page in the book,
okay,
in which you're talking about a classification of 4 different kinds of women being pregnant, and one is very optimistic and she's ready to welcome the baby. One is very negative, and that's clearly that she doesn't want.
Mm-hmm.
And the other ones, the other two classifications are ambivalent, if I remember
That's right.
correctly, and the fourth one was the cool.
Yes.
And this, that touched me deeply because I can almost say that the reason why I lost my first baby was because I had in my mind, I am a business owner, I made great investments in my business, I don't have time to be a mother.
This is not a good time for a baby?
No, then
is that what you were thinking, that was not a good time for having a child?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love that you talk because the two first ones are very clear.
Yes.
I'm really ready to have a baby,
Sure.
or I'm not ready at all.
Right.
But the other two, I find it extremely interesting that people understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what you have not yet said, you were implying it, but you didn't say it, was that we looked both at what people said they wanted, in other words, their conscious processes. I want to have a baby. But the researchers also looked at their unconscious desires for babies, which they didn't talk about, but they were able to get to with psychological tests. And that's where we come into ambivalent mothers. Ambivalent mothers were the ones who said, I want to have a baby, but on an unconscious level, it turned out that they did not. And those were the mothers who had the second worst results in terms of pregnancy. Those were the mothers who had just slightly worse results than the ones who did not want to have babies at all but had to go through with it. So unconsciously, not wanting the baby is a very strong determinant of potentially ending up with perhaps a difficult birth or a premature baby or even a sickly baby.
Yeah. I think this is just so profound because it's like fallacy or a belief that we get pregnant and we're all happy that we will be mothers.
Not at all. It's not true. It's not true. And of course, then we also have huge problems with fathers, or at least the fathers of this baby. Not every father is happy when they find out that their wife is pregnant. So one of the things that I advocate very much is that before anybody gets pregnant, that they make sure that their partner is also happy with the prospect of having a baby. A lot of women are much more into having babies than their partners. And they often figure, oh, well, once the baby comes along, my husband is going to fall in love with it. Not necessarily true.
Yeah. I'm surrounded, now that I'm pregnant more than ever, I'm surrounded by all this fear-mongering about all these horrible ways how children were born and delivered. I really dislike that word because it's, I think packages are delivered. And I love this quote in your book. In my edition, it's page 106. You say, many, perhaps even the majority of violent and painful births are either entirely preventable, or in cases where they aren't, their effects can be materially reduced.
Yes.
And you continue about technological and medical obstetrics, and I love that you also say sometimes by providing less of them, but you close with something very powerful, and at all times, but paying very close attention to the emotional state of the woman about to be wheeled into the delivery room. I completely agree with that, and I would love that you will elaborate on why this is so. What scientific evidence we have to say that this is so.
Well, a tremendous amount of scientific evidence that this is so. We know that when a person is stressed, then there is a huge outpouring of stress hormones, which is cortisone and adrenaline from the adrenal gland, okay? And when you have an outpouring of cortisone, then what happens is that, it's the old fight-flight response, okay? And what that is trying to ready you for is fight or flight, which means that it will shunt all the blood to the large muscles of your body, and that wouldn't be so bad. But in order to do that, the body takes away blood from the internal organs, which then includes the uterus. So when you are stressed, your baby is getting less blood. And of course, it's only the blood that brings oxygen to that baby. Oxygen and nutrition. So without that blood, the baby actually is getting less oxygen and less nutrition. It is starving, and also it is suffocating, which is not good, obviously. So that's one of the things that happens. Secondly, all your muscles contract. So if you're trying to give birth and you are stressed, not only is your uterus getting less blood, but also your muscles are contracting, which means that you cannot dilate your uterus, and therefore you cannot give birth. So what that means is very often that the baby gets stuck in the birth canal, and then, the doctors have to go ahead and do a cesarean section, which of course complicates matters even worse, because now you have, loss of blood, and you have the stress of the operation, and you have the possibility of an infection. And of course, very often the woman will need like a general anesthetic, which then means that the baby is getting also anesthetized, which then means that when the woman finally wakes up, she's not really present to bond with the baby. So, one thing is kind of a domino effect. One thing leads to another. I wanted to write a whole chapter on sort of gynecological interference, like doing all these interventions, like fetal heart monitors and all that kind of stuff. And in my last book, Pre-Parenting, and my literary agent in New York would not allow it, because she said that no publisher is going to publish a book that takes such a strong stand against in vitro fertilization and ultrasound and all those other things that obstetricians love doing, because they have all had it. Like all these female editors at the large publishing houses, totally believe in the importance of ultrasound and, fetal heart monitoring and all that kind of stuff. And so it was censored. It's not in my book.
My God.
Yeah.
Well, I'm totally in your camp. At the age of 40, I had a completely healthy child being born sleeping. And it was thanks to your work.
Yes.
The belief that I am a woman that is created to welcome the child, and that yes, sure, we do have technology in case of any emergency. But childbirth is not an emergency.
Childbirth is not an emergency, and it should not be a medical procedure.
Absolutely.
It's not a medical procedure. There are instances where you do need a doctor. Okay, there may be placenta previa, or perhaps the opening is not large enough. The pelvic opening is not large enough if the baby is too large. There are some necessities for intervention, but, there are places in the world, particularly South America, for example, like Brazil, Uruguay, Argentina, where all the middle class and higher up women go to hospitals to have cesarean sections.
Yeah.
The cesarean section rate in some countries is as high as 80%, which is like totally ridiculous and unhealthy.
But why is it unhealthy? Please tell the audience.
Why is it unhealthy? Because, first of all, it's unhealthy in many different ways. In terms of the baby, when the baby is born without an anesthetic, without forceps, just in a totally natural way, which most women can do, especially if they have had proper prenatal care and know how to breathe and have been prepared for the birth, they can do that. Then that baby coming through the birth canal gets born in a way which is absolutely ideal. That baby gets an incredible massage as it's coming down the birth canal. Every part of his or her body is massaged. And then when it comes out on its own, it begins to have this very first, very primitive idea, but primitive in the sense that it's not totally worked out in its brain, but it's the beginning of an idea. And the idea is, I am okay. I did this on my own, okay? It's kind of a primal thought that is very important, and we all have it, you know? And if that is not the case, and I can go back to that in a second, if that is not the case, and instead of that, the baby is sort of physically brought out of the mother's womb, okay, then the baby is going to get the opposite idea about the world. Okay, this is my first interaction with the world. And what does it consist of? It consists of a kind of physical abuse, okay? I'm being picked up by these huge hands, and I'm being torn out of my mother. And the message is, this is a rough world, and I could not make it on my own. Mm. So these sort of original primal ideas, I find, in clinical practice are very, very important because they set up a certain expectation of life, okay? That how life is, you know, this is your first introduction to the life outside of your mother. So I think that's important. In terms of the mother, of course, there's a huge difference because now she has got, you know, she has had surgery, major surgery, right? The uterus has been cut, which means it's not as strong for the next time that she's pregnant. She has got a scar on her abdomen. She will have to stay in the hospital much longer than if she would have had natural childbirth. There's a chance that she might get infected where the wound is, and there is a very, very good chance that she will not be able to relate to the baby in a healthy way as soon as the baby is born because she will be out, right? She will be unconscious. She will be asleep.
Yeah.
So there is lack of bonding there at the beginning. I mean, what most people nowadays really agree, most obstetricians agree that it is very beneficial for the baby and the mother to spend the first few hours together. And it is very beneficial to put the baby on the mother's breast and just to let the baby rest there. This is an incredibly important time for the mother and baby to bond. And that will not be there if the mother has had a cesarean. Mm-hmm. So whichever way you look at it, whether you just look at it from the standpoint of physical health, or more importantly, as far as I'm concerned, from the standpoint of mental, emotional, psychological health, this is not a good thing. And 80%, 90% of people in some countries, and certainly in some hospitals, are getting exactly this. And the doctors tell them that this is better than natural childbirth because we can actually pick the day on which we can do this, instead of waking me up in the middle of the night. Excuse me. Says the doctor,
No problem.
I can do this for you on a Monday morning, and you will be home on Wednesday, and you will be able to play golf on the weekend. This is wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, I'm so thankful that you say this, because I just see it everywhere. Like it is so wonderful, and it is not wonderful at all.
It's not wonderful.
Not wonderful.
It's not. It is a very bad thing to do. It is not in the best. The only people who benefit from this are the doctors and the hospitals.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's
absolutely. It becomes a mechanistic approach and not a sacred approach.
Exactly. It becomes totally mechanical, totally materialistic, totally, what is convenient.
Yeah. But what is funny is that it's not really convenient.
No.
I want to dovetail from here because I think the reason why women do this is for a 4-letter word called fear.
Yes.
They get into fear of pain.
Yes.
I don't want to be in pain. Let me share with you my personal story. I many times in my life, I got the thinking, it's better to die now. It's better to die. And many times I had these suicidal thoughts. And through remembering my birth experience, I remember that my mother was in a lot of pain, and my mother was so much in pain that she was saying, I'd rather die. I cannot cope with this. I cannot cope with this.
How did that happen?
With a psychologist.
Was it through hypnosis or what?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. Honestly, I cannot tell you the technique that she used, but I was able to remember it, and I asked my mother, and she confirmed. And I think that the good thing is that now I know, so these thoughts sometimes come back, and then I say, well, it's not mine. And I'm able to, the big polarity of that thought, I'm able to let it go.
You're able to distance yourself from it. Yes.
But this is huge, I think, in your work and in the message that I would love to convey to the women, that this fear is something that we are giving our children.
Absolutely.
And I would love to hear your words on this subject, and how can we modify this emotion?
Well, it's easier today in some way than it used to be, because now we have midwives, and in South America, they have doulas. We have some doulas, too. I take it that you might be from South America originally?
Yeah, I was born in Mexico. I live in the Netherlands for 15 years. And here we have both doulas and midwives.
Right, okay. So, with doulas and midwives, of course, being non-medical people, they have a much more natural, a much more positive attitude towards pregnancy. They don't try to medicalize it. What doctors have been sort of taught, I mean, they're really not guilty of this, because, it starts in medical school, and then it's sort of handed down generation after generation. Instead of being taught about all the things that can go well, instead of being taught about uncomplicated pregnancy, the focus in medical schools is always on pathology. Okay, what can go wrong? And so they have been educated, doctors have been educated to look for things that can go wrong. So in a sense, they are always fearful. Okay? It's like you going out on the street and worrying about all the things that could go wrong instead of looking forward to having a nice walk and listening to the birds and looking at the flowers. No, you're concerned about, somebody on a motorbike might come along and hit you. Well, I don't think that you would enjoy your walk the same way if you constantly worried, right? So that's how it is with doctors and pregnancy. They're just so obsessed. Whoops. Are you there?
Yeah. Yes,
okay.
yes,
I lost you there for a second. They're just so obsessed with all the things that can go wrong with the pathology, high blood pressure and placenta previa and, God knows what, that they pass that fear to the women. And so one way of avoid, there are many ways to avoid that. First of all, the best way is not to go to a doctor, who will instill fear in you. Find out from your friends which doctors they have gone to, and find out which ones are, have a positive attitude towards pregnancy, and avoid the fear mongers. That would be one. Secondly, educate yourself as much as possible. And if you do go in with a doctor as opposed to a midwife, if you favor, going and having a hospital birth, go in, first of all, with a doctor who has a positive attitude and who is not going to use all kinds of gynae gadgetry on you. Gynae gadgetry, I like it. It's my own term as far as one who's not going to use that. And secondly, if possible, try to go in with a support person, either a doula or a midwife, who can advocate on your behalf. Because once you get into the hospital, then suddenly doctors and nurses will do things to you that they did not tell you they were going to do. There's always the possibility that they will say, well, we did say that we will not use a local anesthetic, okay? We will not use like an injection in the back. I can't think of it right now at the moment. I haven't thought about this for a while. I've been writing poetry instead, so I'm not into the science at the moment. So they give you these injections in the back so that you don't feel the pain. And so they say, well, we'll have to do that because, we may have to do an episiotomy, right? Whereas you and your doctor decided before you went into the hospital that you're not going to have episiotomy and that you're not going to have a local anesthetic. But suddenly they say you need it. So that's when it's really important. Your husband can't really advocate on your behalf because he's like a fish out of water. He doesn't know what the hell is going on in the hospital, and he's totally confused and anxious. So that's why having a midwife or a doula there who can say to the doctor, well, I think that we should perhaps wait, and perhaps we could get her walking a little bit so that she relaxes, or perhaps we can have her listen to some music, or perhaps I can massage her a little bit before we, progress to the epidural. That's the word that was escaping me. Sorry. Okay, so, before we give her an epidural, why don't we wait a couple of hours and just see what happens? That's the kind of thing I would like to see. So I think that way we can get rid of fear, being well-informed and selecting a doctor who, at least on the surface, is on the same page as you are, and also, going in with someone who you can rely on to advocate on your behalf.
Absolutely. The thing that I am doing personally is promoting happy stories.
That's right. I mean, most births are uneventful and beautiful And I don't know whether you know about water births or not. I imagine you do.
Yeah, my son was born in water.
Okay. So water births and things like that. And my second grandchild was born at home with a midwife, and there were no problems whatsoever. But you have to be careful about these. Obviously, we should avoid any kind of fanaticism. Women who, for example, insist 100% that the only way I'm going to have my baby is through a water birth, that may lead to problems because perhaps you can't, Nobody, we are so different. Each person is so different. So just because your best friend or your sister had a wonderful water birth doesn't mean that you and your baby are ideal candidates for that. So I think that each person, needs to have proper medical care and a proper assessment, and then through discussion with knowledgeable people arrive at some kind of a plan as to how to have their baby.
Yeah, absolutely. Because really the final aim is to have the best possible birth with a happy child, happy mom. It's not a process.
No, and it's not kind of a battle. It should not be a battle against the doctor or the hospital or against your husband or whatever. The important thing is to have a good birth.
Yeah. Oh, I love that you say that because I also see that reality that some people who are into natural birth are almost in argument with the doctors, and this is not healthy either.
No. That's what I call fanaticism, and it always leads to trouble. Always. Very often the women who are most set on a certain type of birth are the very ones who run into problems, unfortunately.
Yeah, but it makes sense to me because when we are closed-minded in whatever direction, then the reality is going to bring us exactly what we don't want.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, let me change gears a little bit. A lot of what I've been, these women who are in the line, they are interested in also to learn how they themselves change during pregnancy, because it's a big transition in the life of the woman. And there is a lot of emphasis in, your tummy grows and your liver moves this way and these new chemicals come along. But I love that you are a psychiatrist, so you can explain us both what is happening with the body. But I'm really interested what is happening with our psyche. In which way we change? What's happening with us?
Well, it's a very interesting process, once again, there are big differences between people. It's all sort of on a spectrum from let's say left to right. Let's say on the left would be a person who does not change at all, and on the right, on the extreme right, would be a person who changes like totally. Okay, and then in between you have your bell curve of people who change more as we go along the curve. And I think, in my experience, the idea of having a little person to think about from now on takes you out of very often a rather narcissistic sort of personality structure, a personality structure where you tend to be selfish and only think about yourself, or you only think about your career and yourself, perhaps a few people around you. But once you start feeling this little baby kicking around in your abdomen, and you start developing a relationship, and it sort of takes over. Like you suddenly become a much more, not suddenly, slowly, over 9 months, you become like a much more caring, sensitive human being. You become a deeper person, instead of, worrying so much about your looks and, the latest fashion to wear and what are we going to do, for holidays next year. You begin to think of this baby, is this going to be a boy or a girl? If it becomes a girl, what is she going to grow up into? What is she going to look? Is she going to look like my mother? What kind of a relationship am I going to have with her or with the boy? You just become a much more caring and three-dimensional person. You grow a lot in those 9 months and, of course, in the following couple of years. So it accelerates a kind of maturation. I think that would be the simplest way of putting it, accelerates your personal growth and maturation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I really would like you to talk a little bit more on this, because it also goes to the world of relationships with the family, relationships in the workplace, how we see our contribution in the world, and of course this part of the relationship with the child and relationship with self is very profound.
Well, you started talking about intuition a little while ago, right? So, one of the things I have found is that women, when they are pregnant, are much more intuitive than at any other time in their lives. And so, they are very often able to communicate or receive communication from their baby in intuitive ways, particularly through dreams, for example. So, a woman might dream that her baby has got blonde hair and brown eyes and is a little boy, and then when the baby is born, the baby looks exactly the way she dreamt he was. or there may be a negative dream where she dreams that she's in a car and she's driving faster and faster. She comes to a precipice and she goes over the precipice and wakes up sort of screaming. And she's absolutely sure that this was the dream of her baby, and an hour later she has a miscarriage. So this can happen too. Excuse me, fighting a little cold here. So the same kind of intuition that very often happens between twins. I'm sure you have heard stories of twins who might be like living thousands of miles apart, and one of them gets sick and the other one immediately feels that there's something wrong with his twin, right? And he calls him and he finds out that, he's sick or he had a car accident or anything like that. How does that happen? We don't know, but we know it happens. And so the same thing happens between pregnant mothers and their unborn children. They have this intuitive communication, and it's very, very strong. And so I think that once that happens and you actually give it credence, which is the important thing, because most of us are also quite intuitive, but we don't pay attention. And so it sort of disappears, okay? Because if you don't pay attention to a message from your unconscious, it stops coming. I work with my patients a lot with dreams, and a lot of patients at the beginning of their therapy might say, "Oh, I never dream," which of course is nonsense, because all of us dream every 15 minutes while we are asleep, right? Then, as I begin to ask them, every session, so what did you dream last night? Gradually dreams start coming up because they're paying attention to it. So it's the same thing with intuition. If you can start paying intuition, if you start paying attention to what you sort of intuitively feel, and you don't just disregard it as nonsense, then you will become more and more intuitive as life progresses. So that's another positive change that can happen to a woman during and after pregnancy, is to become more intuitive.
Mm-hmm. How can we do this? How can we? Because it almost sounds to me like an altered state of consciousness. Right. How can we, let's say, benefit, or what have you seen that it works? Well, your most successful patients, what do you recommend that we could do to take advantage of this moment?
I think the important thing is to trust it, okay? In our culture, we put a huge amount of trust in reality, okay? In things that make sense. To be sensible is very important. And to be rational is very important. We fear irrationality terribly, okay? But in fact, there is a whole other sphere of life which is, if not irrational, but it is certainly sort of, you might say, para-rational. Like it's another domain which is neither irrational nor rational. And that's sort of the intuitive state, you know, where you pick up things that you don't know how you got them. But if you really take note of it, you will find that they often contain very important information. So, you know, I think that an overemphasis on the rational does not serve us well. I'm not in favor of being irrational, but I am in favor of also paying attention to things that sometimes for no reason at all come into your head, you know, like if suddenly, like you picked up that book, for example, today, right? Mm-hmm. There was no reason for you to pick up that book. I mean, it had nothing to do with pre- and perinatal psychology. And it didn't have my name on it or anything, so why would you pick it up? But there was something in you that made you pick it up, right? And then you opened it on a page which had some relationship to my poem about redemption and Baba Yaga, who is a Russian witch from the past. Yeah. So, you know, that was an act of intuition, and there are many like that, but like I say, you know, we have learned not to pay attention to them. So, getting into an altered state of consciousness, which is not that difficult. You know, you could be walking in the woods or just lying on a beach, and the chances are that you are already in an altered state of consciousness. And so going into that and then just kind of letting your mind wander is a wonderful thing to do once in a while.
Just plain silence, being there.
That's right. Tell me when this program is going to be on before we run out of time.
Yes. The program is going to be on from the 9th of July, and it's going to last 2 weeks. Let me see. Here I have the specific agenda.
How can I let my friends know about it?
Absolutely. They have to please go to the page called Pregnantpreneur.
How do you spell the last word?
Pregnant. That's pregnant.
Yeah, I got that. Yes, next bit.
Pregnantpreneur. PREN. EUR.
Pregnantpreneur, yes.
BlancaVergara.com. And BlancaVergara.com. Vergara is with V.
I see it on the screen. Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
And my mother's sister's name was Blanca. Yes.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Another coincidence.
That's right. Good. Well, we have 5 more minutes. Ask me anything you like.
Yes, I really want to ask you to please tell us about your last book and how can we get to know more of this, where we can take it further, because you have this association that you set up. So tell us about how people can get more of you.
My last book is called Pre-Parenting, and that's in paperback, and you can get it on Amazon.com, Pre-Parenting, and Amazon.com you can get it, published by Simon & Schuster in New York. And the association that I started, which is now in its 29th year, is called the Pre- and Perinatal Psychology Association. I'm sorry, not that was the old name. I'm sorry. I said the new name is Pre- and Perinatal Psychology Association and Health. It's APA. No, sorry. Association for Pre- and Perinatal Psychology and Health. The letters are APPAH. So if you just look up APA on Google, APPAH, all capital letters.
I will put the link under this. And this is, of course, for psychologists, I can imagine.
It's for mental health workers. It's for clergy people. It's for people who work in prisons, adoption agencies, anybody who has any work to do with pregnant mothers and or with children or even as adults of perhaps difficult births or difficult pregnancies, so that they are still carrying the marks of those early traumas. So, people who work in adoption, for example, ought to be very interested. We have yearly conferences. The next one is going to be in November in San Francisco. And we have very interesting speakers, and we have a journal. So anybody who's interested can just go to the website. APA will get you there. Yes.
Fantastic. This is something that everybody should know, because it's just so profound. It's if I may, I will change the T-shirt that you would like to design. Instead of baby under construction, I will put human being under construction.
Okay, human being under construction. Okay.
I find so profound the work that you do, that is really creating humanity. And I cannot thank you enough for the work that you are doing. You change the life of my family and me personally, my own life. And I hope that your words touch other people in this occasion, and they choose for peace, for love, for a different paradigm of pregnancy and birth.
Amen to that. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. It was a real pleasure. Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. And thank you, everybody else, for being on the line this time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.